All right, so let's dive into surveillance in the digital age. It's incredibly relevant, but also a little unsettling. We use smartphones, apps, and the internet every day. But alongside all that, there's this whole invisible world of surveillance. And today we're going to peel back the layers on that.
Yeah.
And believe me, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why we're here, to explore how this world of surveillance affects all of us. From your personal devices to these large-scale government programs, we'll be tackling some pretty intriguing questions today. Some might even say unnerving, like can the government actually turn on your phone's camera without you knowing? Are those windowless skyscrapers we see in cities actually for surveillance? And how is China using technology to create a social credit score for its citizens? And most importantly, is there anything we can do to protect ourselves in this increasingly digital world?
Yeah. To kick things off, let's start with Edward Snowden, the man who blew the whistle on mass surveillance. In one of his interviews with Vice, he was asked a really simple question. Can government agencies really access our phones and laptops? His answer was chillingly straightforward. Yes, absolutely. Anything.
Wow. Snowden's revelations were a total game changer. He exposed how deeply government agencies can tap into our devices, often using technology we're not even aware of.
Right, like MSI catchers.
Oh, yeah, exactly. IMSI catchers.
Which basically act as a fake cell tower.
That's right. They trick your phone into connecting, and then they intercept all your data. Think about that for a second. Your phone could be sending information to a third party without you ever knowing.
It's crazy. Like right out of a spy movie, I was reading about this Norwegian newspaper that went hunting for these MSI catchers in Oslo. They found so many near government buildings that at first they thought their equipment was malfunctioning.
Oh, wow.
It was like this constant feeling of being watched, even when you think you're just going about your day.
And what's even more concerning is that this technology, which was initially meant for tracking like high-value targets in conflict zones, has found its way back home.
Oh, no. You're not going to tell me they started using it on their own citizens.
Well, unfortunately, that is exactly what happened. The Wall Street Journal reported that within just 6 months, the same tech that was being used in places like Yemen for a program codenamed Shenanigans was being deployed domestically by the FBI. They even used it to monitor protests like the Black Lives Matter movement.
Oh, wow. So these tools meant for specific situations can be repurposed for mass surveillance pretty easily.
Yeah, it seems that way. It raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, it really does. It feels like we're living in what some experts are calling the golden age of surveillance. It's almost ironic. The technology that was designed for convenience to connect us and make our lives easier is also being used to monitor us in ways we might not even imagine.
Absolutely, and it's not just the government either. Think about all the apps we use, the websites, we visit our location data. All of this creates a really detailed digital footprint, this treasure trove of information that can be accessed and analyzed. And then there's the even more unsettling world of commercially available spyware.
Spyware, so like software that anyone can just buy?
Yep, software that anyone can buy with capabilities that would make even the most seasoned spy blush.
Wow, so like what kind of capabilities are we talking about here?
Well, one example is Finfisher. It was exposed in a documentary by NDVR.
Finfisher. The name sounds harmless, like something you'd use to track fish migrations, not people.
Yeah, the name is very misleading. The reality is anything but harmless. Security researcher Morgan Marquis-Boire demonstrated in the documentary how Finfisher can be used to remotely activate your phone's microphone and camera, record your calls, and even track your movements. It's like having a bug planted right in your pocket, and you might never even know it's there.
That is unnerving. So look, if our phones can be turned into listening devices without us knowing, is there any way to know if we've been targeted by this spyware?
Unfortunately, that's the scariest part. As Snowden put it, perhaps the most terrifying thing is if your phone had been hacked, you would never know. It's this constant feeling of vulnerability, this awareness that our digital lives are no longer entirely our own.
Okay, so we're all potentially walking around with these digital vulnerabilities in our pockets.
Yeah.
But here's a question that's been on my mind. If these agencies have the power to spy on practically anyone who's making sure that they're not abusing that power, who watches the watchers?
That is the million-dollar question. And the answer might surprise you, because as we'll explore in the next part of this deep dive, even the institutions meant to provide oversight and accountability are not immune to the reach of surveillance.
Yeah, it was almost mind-boggling to think that the very people tasked with overseeing these powerful agencies could themselves become targets of surveillance.
Wow.
But that's exactly what happened. The CIA was caught hacking into the Senate Intelligence Committee's computers.
Yeah, This revelation was brought to light by Jason Leopold in a Vice CE documentary, and it sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. It really demonstrated a blatant disregard for the checks and balances that are supposed to govern these agencies.
Hold on. So the CIA, the agency responsible for gathering intelligence and protecting national security, was actively spying on the Senate committee that was supposed to be overseeing its operations. That's crazy. It's like a student cheating on a test by stealing the teacher's answer key.
Yeah, the irony is not lost there. And the attempted cover-up makes the story even more unsettling. Leopold uncovered a letter written by then CIA Director John Brennan. It was intended as an apology to the Senate committee for the hacking, but this smoking gun letter admitting to wrongdoing was never actually sent.
So it was a confession he never intended to make public. Why even write it in the first place?
Right. Well, it suggests that there was an internal awareness of wrongdoing, but a reluctance to face the consequences. The CIA only acknowledged the letter's existence when it was accidentally released to Leopold during a Freedom of Information Act request. They even tried to prevent him from publishing it, citing national security concerns. But the real concern seems to be embarrassment and a desire to avoid accountability.
Yeah, it's a classic case of those in power trying to sweep their mistakes under the rug. This whole situation raises serious doubts about how effectively these agencies are being held accountable.
Absolutely. Senator Ron Wyden, a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, has been really vocal about this whole issue of government overreach and surveillance. He's been pushing for greater transparency and oversight of these programs. There's this famous clip where he questions James Clapper, the then Director of National Intelligence, about whether the NSA collects data on millions of Americans. Clapper just flatly denies it. But later, thanks to Snowden's leaks, we find out that he lied.
It's unbelievable that someone in such a high-level position, sworn to uphold the truth, could just lie like that and face practically no consequences.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how much we can trust the government's assurances about the limits of surveillance.
Exactly. If the people in charge of these programs are willing to mislead the public and Congress, how can we be sure they are using these powerful tools responsibly? It erodes public trust and makes meaningful oversight nearly impossible.
Okay, so we've established that there are some serious concerns about oversight and accountability when it comes to government surveillance programs. But here's another question that's been nagging me. If these programs are so vast, collecting data on practically everyone, shouldn't they be more effective at stopping things like terrorist attacks?
Well, that's where it gets even more interesting. Despite having access to this massive trove of data, Snowden claims that mass surveillance has never actually prevented a single terrorist attack.
Wait, really? But how's that possible? I remember Snowden himself, during the Boston Marathon bombing investigation, said he was certain the NSA already had information on the bombers in their databases.
Yeah, it does seem counterintuitive. But two independent commissions appointed by the White House investigated the effectiveness of these programs, and they reached the same conclusion. They found that while these programs collect tons of data, they haven't been demonstrably effective in preventing terrorist attacks.
Wow, so all this data, all this invasion of privacy, and it's basically useless. It feels like a massive overreach. Casting a wide net, but failing to catch the intended targets.
The commissions recommended significant reforms and restrictions to these programs. They really emphasized the need to balance security concerns with individual rights, but very few of those recommendations were actually adopted. Snowden warns about the potential for these systems to be used for what he calls turnkey tyranny. The idea that this infrastructure of surveillance, even if it's ineffective in its stated goals, could easily be abused by future administrations.
Turnkey tyranny. That sounds pretty chilling. It suggests that even if we trust the current government not to misuse this power, there's no guarantee that future leaders will exercise the same restraint.
It's definitely a cautionary tale. It highlights how important it is to have clear legal frameworks, robust oversight mechanisms, and strong protections for individual rights. The potential for abuse is always there when you have such powerful tools available.
So in the U.S., we have this sprawling, arguably ineffective, and potentially dangerous system of surveillance. But how does this compare to what's happening in other parts of the world? China, for example, has been making headlines with its social credit score system. It sounds like something straight out of a dystopian sci-fi novel.
Yeah, it's a system that's been getting a lot of attention and concern. Basically, it assigns points for positive and negative actions, and those points can affect everything, from your ability to travel to your access to loans. It's all about shaping behavior through constant monitoring and evaluation.
So is it like a rewards program for good behavior, but with much higher stakes? Like if you donate blood, you get points.
Yeah.
But if you jaywalk, you lose points.
Yeah. Essentially. And it can have very real consequences. We learned from a Carnegie Endowment book launch and a behind the news video that a woman named Dan gets perks like waiving deposits on rentals because she has a high score. It's presented as a way to encourage positive contributions to society.
So on the surface, it might seem like a harmless system,
Yeah,
even beneficial in some ways.
yeah.
But I can't shake this feeling that there's like a darker side to this whole thing.
You're right. There's a flip side to the system that is much more concerning. Take Lu Hu, for example. He's an investigative journalist, and he faces all sorts of restrictions because of his low score, most likely because of his work exposing corruption.
Oh, wow.
It shows how the system can be used to punish dissent and silence people who criticize the government.
So it's not just about rewarding good behavior. It's about controlling what people say and do, discouraging any form of opposition. That's really disturbing.
Yeah, the chilling effect on free speech and political activism is one of the most worrying aspects of this whole system. It creates this climate of self-censorship where people are afraid to speak out or challenge the status quo because they don't want to damage their score and face the consequences.
It's a stark reminder that technology, even when it's framed as a tool for social good, can be used in ways that undermine fundamental freedoms. But from what I've read, China's use of surveillance technology goes way beyond just social credit scores. In some regions, it's taken on a much darker, more oppressive form.
That's right. The situation in Xinjiang, home to the Uyghur minority, is particularly alarming. It's a stark example of how surveillance technology can be used for mass repression and control.
Xinjiang sounds like a real-life dystopian surveillance state. Cameras everywhere. Facial recognition software tracking every move. Even DNA collection. It's a chilling picture of what life is like under constant surveillance.
The New York Times did this in-depth investigation into the situation in Xinjiang, and the details are incredibly disturbing. Imagine living in a place where there are cameras on every street corner, using facial recognition software to identify you and track your movements. Your phone is tracked, your online activity is monitored, and they even collect your DNA and store it in a government database.
It's like the authorities are trying to create a complete and inescapable digital panopticon, where every aspect of people's lives is monitored and controlled.
Yeah, the Chinese government claims that these measures are necessary for predicting potential threats and maintaining security, particularly targeting the Uyghur population. But human rights groups have denounced these practices as a gross violation of basic freedoms and a form of ethnic profiling.
A pretty stark contrast to the seemingly positive applications of surveillance that we discussed earlier, like China's city brain system in Hangzhou, which uses surveillance tech to manage traffic flow and improve public services. On the one hand, they're using surveillance to create smart cities. On the other, they're using it to track and control entire populations.
It definitely highlights the duality of this kind of technology, its ability to be used for both good and bad. But it also raises concerns about mission creep. Where systems that were initially designed for specific purposes are gradually expanded and repurposed for more intrusive forms of monitoring.
It's a slippery slope. And once you start down that path, it becomes really difficult to turn back. But let's shift our focus back to the U.S. for a moment. We've been talking about digital surveillance. But what about the physical infrastructure of surveillance? You mentioned earlier those windowless skyscrapers that seem to be in a lot of major cities. What's the deal with those?
Those buildings have been the subject of so much speculation and intrigue. There's this whole windowless skyscraper conspiracy theory about them, with lots of people thinking that they house secret government surveillance operations.
A conspiracy theory. Okay, now I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
We learned from a video by Stuart Hicks and reporting from The Intercept that these buildings, with their reinforced concrete lack of windows and massive ventilation systems, weren't always so mysterious. They were originally designed to house telecommunications equipment during the Cold War, built to withstand potential nuclear attacks.
So these buildings were built for Cold War resilience. And now they're allegedly being used to spy on us. That's wild, like something out of a spy thriller.
That's the theory. The program is reportedly codenamed Fairview, and it involves AT&T, the telecom giant, providing access and cooperation to the NSA. It really shows how blurred the lines are between private corporations and government agencies when it comes to surveillance.
AT&T. So our phone company is potentially complicit in government surveillance. That's a little unsettling to think about. Are there any specific buildings that have been linked to this program?
Yes, there are a few. One is 10 South Canal in Chicago. It's this 26-story tower designed with this tight grid of columns suggesting a really robust structure. It's got this imposing presence, almost ominous, just looming over the city, and yet most people who walk by every day have no clue what might be happening inside.
It's like a hidden world operating right in plain sight. What about other buildings? Are there any others that stand out?
Another one is 33 Thomas Street in New York City. It's got this unique, almost brutalist design, a bundle of tubes with vents at the top. It's so striking that it's even been featured in movies like Winter Kills, and 33 Thomas Street, often portrayed as a symbol of government secrecy and surveillance.
Wow, it's amazing how these buildings that were designed for Cold War resilience have taken on this new, almost sinister meaning in the age of digital surveillance.
Right.
They become symbols of this invisible world of monitoring and data collection that surround us.
It's a sobering thought, realizing that these symbols of surveillance are hidden in plain sight, operating unseen in the middle of our major cities. It raises questions about how much our lives are being monitored and the trade-offs we make between security and privacy in this digital age.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to think about. So after this deep dive into the world of surveillance, from our smartphones to government programs and secret skyscrapers, what's it all mean? What are the key takeaways we should be thinking about? It's like we've uncovered this whole hidden world, one that exists right alongside our everyday lives, this world of data collection, monitoring, and control, from our smartphones to government programs to these seemingly harmless, windowless skyscrapers.
It's understandable to feel a little overwhelmed, even powerless in the face of such pervasive surveillance. But I think the important thing to remember is that we still have agency. We still have choices. Awareness is the first step towards taking back some of that control.
Yeah, you're right. It's not about being paranoid or anything. It's about being informed, making conscious decisions about the technology we use and the information we share.
Exactly. We need to ask ourselves, what are the trade-offs we're willing to make between convenience and privacy? Are we okay with our every move online and offline being tracked and analyzed? And what can we do to reduce those risks?
That's a tough one. No easy answers. But one thing is for sure, we can't just ignore it. We have to engage in this conversation. Demand more transparency and accountability from those in power, and explore ways to protect our rights in this increasingly digital world.
Absolutely. The future of surveillance is being written right now, and it's up to all of us to make sure that it's a future that respects our privacy, our freedoms, our basic human dignity.
Yeah, it's a call to action. A reminder that we're not just passive consumers of technology, but active participants in shaping the world we want to live in.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of surveillance, we'll leave you with this thought. What role do you want to play in this evolving landscape? How will you navigate this world of ever-increasing data collection and monitoring? The choices we make today will shape the world of tomorrow.